evening, my friends, and welcome back to another video here from the Off-Grid Garage in hot and sweaty Australia. It is a late night show and temperatures are still up to 30 degrees. So if I'm a bit shiny tonight, that is why. And you have just seen it. Tonight is all about the new JK Inverter BMS, which is out on the market for a few weeks now. And we already had a look at the hardware and the software of this JK BMS. Expectations were high, the hardware looks good, the software not so much. Because after everything JK has promised with this BMS, the software was really not great and lagged behind all their promises. And I think I have tested now 6 or 7 different firmwares on this BMS. Well, and as you have seen in the community post, last night the version 14.13 came out, and I was able to have a very first quick look last night at this new software version, which hopefully fixes all the issues this software, this BMS had before. So, and tonight we want to have a look at these new functions, we want to have a look at the app, we want to go through all the settings of this new BMS, and in tomorrow's video we want to test all these functions. And we actually want to see if they all work as promised. So it's a 2-part video. The app today, the test drive tomorrow. Well, there will be actually a 3rd video because we need to test the parallel setup as well. Because I have ordered 5 of these BMSs already. Well, plus number 6 over there. I want to know, and I want to share, how these BMSs actually work in parallel setup. How is the communication working when you have multiple of these BMSs? Okay, I would say without further ado, let's get right into the application. For this new firmware version, you need to download the newest version of the JK BMS app. So let me move. So the status page or dashboard hasn't changed much. There are a few more settings and parameters now showing in the top part of this screen. So here at the top we can see one of the new features already. It's a pre-discharge option, which is turned off at the moment. I have asked JK what this function is for. Haven't heard back from them yet, but I hope for the next video I have an answer for you. Well, apart from that, everything looks pretty standard. We can see the balancer is already working because we haven't selected a battery type yet. And we can also see the usual stuff here like average cell voltage, remaining capacities, state of charge, the cycle count. So if you have ordered your BMS with a heating function, you can see the current your heater uses at the moment. The BMS has now also a smart sleep setting, and it shows you the countdown timer until the BMS goes to sleep. And below that we have the single cell voltages and also the status of the wire resistance. So this is all pretty standard, which you are already used to from the other JK BMS app. And if I connect to my old JK BMS, which is in the middle shelf battery, you can see we have far less information showing because the BMS is not supporting all these new functions. So if we go back to the new JK BMS, we can see all the features and functions this BMS has to offer. Alright, let's go to the settings. Verify password. And the first thing we want to do, we want to click on lithium iron phosphate in the top right hand corner, select our profile, and then modify this as we go. Alright, cell count 16, battery capacity should be 280. Okay. Balanced trigger voltage is 10 millivolt. This is the voltage deviation. So if the voltage delta is below 10 millivolt, the balancer will not do anything. And we can calibrate the voltage and current as we have seen in previous versions already. So then we have got the start balance voltage, which sits on 3 volts. That's why the balancer is already running. 3.45 volts. We have a quick look. Yep, balancer has stopped now working. Perfect. Maximum balance current is 2 amps for the active balancer. We have a cell over voltage protection of 3.6, which is standard, which is totally fine. I set mine to a 3.65 because this is the maximum these cells can be charged to. And now here's one of the first new parameters we have seen. It is called the cell requested charging voltage. And this is nothing different than our CVL, our charge voltage limit. So obviously it takes this voltage times 16 because we've got a 16S battery. And this is then the CVL it submits to your inverter. And right below that we have a state of charge 100% voltage. This is a value where your BMS resets to 100% state of charge. So if one cell reaches this voltage, it resets to 100% state of charge. You can see it up here. And it also sets the remaining capacity the same as the battery capacity. So it resets both capacity and state of charge. Yeah, and this was always a big complaint with the JK BMS. You could only reset the BMS to 100% state of charge if you hit an overvoltage protection. So you had to reach the 3.6 volts or whatever you have set to reset to 100%. Not any longer. You can set a specific voltage now when you want your BMS to show 100% state of charge. Because for example, I'm charging only to 55.2 volts, which is 3.45 per cell. And then I absorb for 15-20 minutes and the battery is charged to 99.6% or something. So this is 100% for me. Yep, so perfect. I can now set a specific voltage and reset the BMS and have the inverter and the BMS showing 100%. So then we've got the usual stuff, the cell over voltage protection recovery, 3.45 volts. By the way, I was complaining a bit about the order of all these parameters here because they seem to be a bit out of order basically. We've got the cell over voltage protection up here and then the cell over voltage protection recovery 3 parameters further down. And they explained it, well, this is user friendly actually because you have to go through all the values and have to start with the highest at the top and you have to go lower with every value you are setting. Well, I cannot really confirm that because my balance voltage is a lot lower than my cell over voltage protection. So I'm not sure. I will keep working with JK to get this in a better order. I think this needs to be a bit more grouped now. Yep, there should be cell over voltage protection and right underneath should be the over voltage protection recovery. That makes sense to me, right? But leave your comments down below. What do you think? And then we have the cell under voltage protection recovery. And we have also a state of charge 0% voltage. So you not only can reset the BMS to 100% state of charge, no, you can also set it to 0% at a certain voltage. So if you, for example, stop discharging at 2.64 volts, it will then show 0% state of charge. So you can use this as well now, and you have very defined points, 0% and 100%. So that is brilliant. No other BMS has got this function. So, and then the next parameter is the power off voltage. So when you hit 2.5 volts, it actually turns off the BMS and it goes into a deep sleep mode. So it's not using any power from the battery anymore. All right, and the next parameter is one of the brand new ones. It is called the cell requested float voltage. Yes, the BMS has no float voltage. So up here we have the cell RCV, which is the requested charge voltage. And below here we have the requested float voltage, which can be set differently. Hang on. I know you've got questions, I know. We then have the smart sleep voltage, which sits on 3.5. If all the cells are under 3.5 volts and there's no current going in and out of the battery, it starts this timer here, the time enter sleep. So this is something if you have your battery on a boat, in a cabin, or if you transport your battery for a longer period of time, if all the cells go under a certain voltage, it goes into deep sleep as well. And then it sleeps for 24 hours and then it checks again if there is any activity in the BMS. Okay, then we have our continued charge current. This is your CCL in Victron or your current charge limit. This tells your inverter how fast it should charge your battery. And we will see this tomorrow in our test. It will actually take 5% off that value. That means if I set this one to 100 amps, it will show 95 amps in your inverter. So it leaves a bit of margin there, just in case you have a peak or something, you're not triggering any overcurrent protection. Then we've got the charge overcurrent protection delay in seconds and a charge overcurrent protection recovery of 60 seconds. And then we have the same for the continued discharge current, which is your DCL, your discharge current limit. Tells the inverter how much current it can pull from the battery. If the inverter needs more current to power your load, it takes the rest from the grid. Well, if you're off-grid, it will disregard this setting anyway. Because there's only the battery as an energy source and it pulls as much as your load needs, regardless what the BMS tells your inverter. And here as well, we've got an overcurrent protection delay and an overcurrent protection recovery time we can set. You can see all these 6 last parameters, they're all nicely grouped. So I would like to see this one for the voltages further up as well. We then have the usual temperatures, the charge over temperature, the discharge over temperature, the charge under temperature, which I told them already is wrong. It shouldn't be minus 20 degrees. You should not charge your lithium battery in negative temperatures at all. So these are some minor bugs they need to fix in the next firmware update. The short current protection sits on 150 microseconds and there's a recovery of 5 seconds. So if you make a short, it waits 5 seconds and then tries again. If there's still a short, it keeps going. And here we've got a setting. It is the discharge pre-charge timer. I don't know what that is. I'll update you as soon as possible. So the device address is the same as the dip switch on the front of the BMS. So if you change the switches, it changes the number here in the BMS as well. And this is what we need for paralleling all these BMSs then. They all need to have an individual address. And here's another parameter which is called data stored period. And they explained this to me already, but I haven't really looked into this, so I'll give you an update about this feature as well. I think it is about the longer term storage of the log files. And you can also download them and open them in the PC app as well as in the mobile app. So boys and girls, and now we have 2 brand new features here, which we have requested for quite a while. The first one is the RCV timer. So basically this timer here is an absorption timer. We can now set an absorption time. How long will the BMS tell the inverter to keep the RCV, your requested charge voltage, or the CVL? It sits on 1 hour. You can go down to 0.1, click OK, and it still accepts it. So 0.1 of an hour is 6 minutes, right? So in 6 minutes increments, you can set your absorption time now. And yes, after this timer has run out, it goes to the float mode. It changes your CVL or your charge voltage limit to the new float voltage, which you could set up here. Okay, and then what? The battery sits on float voltage now. How do we get out of it again? Well, there is actually now a second timer for that, which is called RFV, so the requested float voltage timer. And here, for example, you can set something like 6 hours. Yeah. And after these 6 hours, your inverter will recharge the battery to your set absorption voltage, which is the RCV. So this is your rebulk timer. So let's set the RCV to 1 hour and this one to 6 hours. Okay. Here. So, okay, scenario. Charging your battery. The BMS tells your inverter to charge to a 3.58 volt times 16. Once this is reached, start the RCV timer for 1 hour. So it keeps this voltage for 1 hour. Afterwards, you need to scroll up again now. Afterwards, it goes to the cell RFV, the requested float voltage, which is 3.54. And now these are the wrong settings here. I just leave the standard settings because I want to explain how this all works. So it goes to the float voltage after this 1 hour. It lowers your voltage to whatever you set in the BMS now. And then it stays in this float voltage for 6 hours. After these 6 hours, if there is still sunlight out there, it would start another charge cycle and charges to your cell RCV, the requested charge voltage again. And you can set this timer as per your needs. If you want to have multiple rebulk sessions over the day for whatever reason you want this, you can do this. You can just set this one here to like 0.1 hour. It would float only for 6 minutes and then it would rebulk and recharge the battery to a higher voltage again. For whatever reason you want to do this, some people want to keep the battery on a higher voltage, and so you can do this. With this timer, you can do whatever you like. I personally think once we hit the absorption voltage and have balanced at this voltage as well, and we go into float mode, it is not necessary to recharge to the absorption voltage again at the same day. Yeah, and that's why I have requested, well, if we put this timer in here and set this one to 6 or 8 or 10 hours, it will wait for this time on float mode, which means it keeps the battery 100% charged, but at a lower voltage, yeah, at a healthy lower float voltage. And then somewhere in the middle of the night, it goes to bulk again, and then the next morning it can recharge. It does a new charge cycle again. But again, you can set this as you like. So now you would ask, well, why is there no tail current? Why is there no charge or a full charge current, as we have seen in the Seplos version 3 BMS and also in the Pace BMSs, yeah? For the full charge voltage and the full charge current. When both are met, BMS resets to 100%. Well, honestly, I don't see the point of having a tail current if you have a timer. Yeah, Victron has got both, and you can disable either or can use both as you want to. But this is probably a discussion we should have in a separate video if it makes sense to have a tail current at all. My experience so far is a tail current doesn't make sense, especially not when you have a mix of sun and cloud during the day and you charge with different currents into your battery. Because very easily you can go under the tail current threshold and the BMS thinks, oh, we are fully charged, and goes to float mode. While outside was only a cloud in front of the sun and lowered your charge current. And that's why I think a timer is far more consistent. The timer runs regardless how fast or slow you charge. And as you see, you can adjust all these settings here exactly to the needs of your system design. We have then the user private data and the user data too. Someone left a comment quite a while under one of the videos and explained what these settings are for. I have totally forgotten. I will ask JK again what they actually mean, what they do, and report back to you. Well, and then we have the usual UART protocol number 1. And I think they have already added more inverters here to this list. And then we've got the UART protocol number 2, which is the internal communication from one JK BMS to another JK BMS. And we also have the CAN protocol, which I have set to Victron already, but you can see we have quite a few BMSs in here which are now supported via CAN bus. So the list is slowly growing. But we are still not at 48 inverters, which they have advertised to support at the beginning. Okay, and now, as I said, well, Andy, we've got a surprise for you as well. We have implemented actually more function and features than you requested. So the first one is a LCD buzzer trigger. You know, the LCD has a buzzer. I didn't know that. And when we click on this one here, we can certainly turn the buzzer off. We can also let it buzz now at a low state of charge, a battery over voltage, a battery under voltage, battery cell over voltage, battery cell under voltage, charge over current and a discharge over current, a battery over temperature, a MOSFET over temperature, and a general system alarm. All these triggers can activate the buzzer in the LCD display. I didn't know they have a buzzer actually, so I'm surprised. And for each of these triggers now, you can select, where are we? A buzzer trigger value and a buzzer release value. So you can say, well, turn the buzzer on if one of my cells goes over 3.6 volts and turn it off again if it goes under 3.55 volts again, for example. Or you do the same with the temperatures or the current. If your current gets too high, it buzzes. So pretty cool, right? But guys, wait, there's more. We also have a dry one trigger. So clicking on this gives us similar trigger points, yeah? Low state of charge, battery over voltage, under voltage, current, temperatures. And as well here we have a trigger and a release. This is the dry contact number 1. Let me quickly show you. As you may remember, the BMS comes with 2 contactors, 2 little relays here. And we've got these contacts here at the front panel. See these green terminals there? These are the contacts. And the number 3 and 4 is for contactor number 2. Yes, and your guess is absolutely right. Below that is a dry 2 trigger. This is for the second contactor. So we can now freely program these 2 relays when they trigger, when they release again. A lot of parameters for a lot of trigger points, voltage, current, temperatures, alarms. Unbelievable. So if your state of charge goes low, for example, you can start a generator. Or you can start charging your battery from the grid. If your battery gets too warm, you can turn on a fan or an air condition. If one of your battery cells gets over a certain voltage, you can activate another active balancer now. Because these are dry contacts, they are potential free contacts. It just closes a contact in the relay and you can connect whatever you like at these contacts. Guys, how good is that? This was a surprise for me as well, with the buzzer and these two dry contacts. And this was something we have requested from JK to put in, but we have never ever discussed that. I have explained it to them once or twice, but this is a couple of weeks ago. And I would never thought they're actually working on this solution as well. This is probably why it took them over 2 weeks now to release this brand new firmware. Yeah, and then further down here are the wire resistance settings, so you can actually calibrate your balance cables if they are... I've never done it. I don't really, I don't think it needs to be that precise that you need to calibrate them, but you can. Okay guys, so far all the settings now from the new JK BMS, or from the new JK BMS with the new firmware 14.13. And now you could say, well, I've got the Victron system which does take care of all this already. It does absorption and float mode and has all the timers set and everything. But I still want to use the JK BMS, what do I do with all these settings? Or I have one of these fancy inverters which have all these settings as well and can apparently do all this charging logic as well. And you still want to use the JK BMS. So what do? You go into control and you go all the way down, and here you can turn off and turn on float mode. Yeah, and what this does is, if charging float mode is turned off, it charges to your requested voltage to 3.58 volts and keeps the voltage there constant. This is what the BMS requests from your inverter then. Charging to a certain voltage and then stay there forever. So if you want to do that, turn off float mode, and the BMS basically behaves as one of the older ones which doesn't have all these functions. So you got the choice. Do you want the BMS to control your charging logic? Turn on float mode. If not, turn it off. How good is that? Well, and the other functionality of this charging float mode is, if you turn this one on, you could go into the settings and set your cell requested charge voltage to, say, 3.6 volts, right? So it would charge now the battery to 3.6 volts times 16, and obviously your balancer would kick in. So what is it doing now? Exactly, it does the perfect top balance for you. Yeah, it stays on this voltage until you turn float mode back on. So you could do this once or twice a year, depending on your batteries and how matched they are, to fully top balance your battery fully automatically from the app. You just need the app and turn off float mode, and it keeps the voltage at 3.6 volts. In the morning, everything will be 100% balanced. And then you turn on float mode again, and it does the normal absorption, timing, floating. That is amazing that a BMS can do that. And here we also have the smart sleep switch. If we turn this one on and go back into our dashboard, we can see the time enter sleep is now counting down. If this one goes to 0, the BMS turns off for energy saving purposes. So here again, you can turn on and turn off this function depending if you like it or not, or if you need it. You can also turn on and off the display. There was actually a question today or yesterday under one of my videos if JK could implement another physical switch at the BMS to turn on and turn off the display. Well, this is all done via the software now. If the display is off like this, you can press the power button of the BMS just once, and the BMS display turns on for about 20 seconds and then it turns off again. If you press and keep holding the power button, the BMS will turn off after 5 seconds. And then we've got the usual charge and discharge function switches here, the balance function switch, and also an emergency switch. An emergency switch. And this overrides any protection parameter. So if your battery turns off because there's a low state of charge, or one of the batteries is, or the temperatures are getting too hot, you can set this emergency switch here and everything turns back on and you can further use your battery. So this is really for an emergency if you need all the power to save your life. We've got the heating function switch here. I'm not sure how the heating actually works in this BMS here. I have to ask them as well. So, and this is pretty much it, guys. So these are the new features and functions they have implemented to charge your battery optimally. So your inverter or charger will only listen what the BMS is telling it now, if you connect both with an Ethernet cable, and they can talk via the CAN protocol. So I think this is a huge step now forward with this BMS, or with any BMS actually. This is the first BMS on the market which has this charging algorithm. I know there's the Batrium and the REC BMS and the do-it-yourself BMS, I think, as well. They've got these float settings and timers as well. But talking about the consumer-grade BMS, this one here is the first one who's got all these functionalities now included. And from what I can see is, this is now absolutely usable. Charges to a voltage, holds it for a certain amount of time, lowers the voltage, holds it for a certain amount of time, and then restarts the whole cycle. So this makes totally sense to me. And you can set all these parameters as you like them, as you need them. You can charge to whatever you like and float to whatever you like. You can set the timers as you want them. I think this is pretty good. But to be honest, I'm not sure if this actually all works. This all looks good in the app, in the software now, but does it actually work in practice? So, and tomorrow we are going to connect the Frankenstein battery to our solar and then let the BMS do a full charge cycle. I want to see it absorption time, floating time, and then reabsorb, rebulk again afterwards. If this all works, man, this is amazing then. This is an amazing piece of technology. And thankfully I've bought all of them. So JK told me they've got no stock because Andy has bought all of these BMSs now, and I sell them now for double the price. No, of course not. JK has plenty of stock of these BMSs, so... And of course I want to test these dry contacts as well and see if we can trigger these relays as per our setting in the app. That'll be amazing. So, if you have one of the old JK BMSs like the BD6820S10P, for example. Yeah, these old style BMSs here. Should you upgrade your BMS now to one of the new JK BMSs? Old, new. I probably wouldn't do that. Because these ones, they are still amazing pieces of technology, and we know we can use the GPS port now and connect the PETA board, which is just over there, and it adds even more functionality to these older JK BMSs than we have right now with the new JK BMS. If you have these ones, keep them. Consider buying a PETA board if you want the functionality and the home assistant integration, as I've shown in one of the last videos. If you are in for a brand new BMS and you are planning to use more than one battery, yeah, I probably would go with a new JK BMS then. But this again is just a rough decision-making thought. So it is definitely not a rule. It is definitely not a rule set in stone. So it all depends on your circumstances, on your battery and system design, what you want to try, what you want to achieve, how far you want to go, how many batteries you're planning to install, all this kind of stuff. So there's more to consider than just old and new JK. Alright, my friends, as always, I link all the information under the video. I have put the JK BMS back on my website as well if you want to buy one of these new ones or want to buy one of these ones here. I always say old and new. It is actually not an old BMS. This is up-to-date BMS, the same as this one. It is just a different style of BMS. So all the links are down below, as well as this brand new firmware 14.13. If I'm allowed to share this new firmware already, there will be a yes on the screen. If not, there will be a no on the screen. Otherwise, we have to wait for an official publication from JK. But again, I have not tested this firmware now in practice. This is just the parameters I've seen on the app. But we will certainly do this tomorrow, so I'm very excited. And I cannot wait to see if this all works now. And I can fully recommend the new JK BMS then. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for all your amazing support here. For all these wonderful and beautiful people out there who have donated to the channel, thank you very much. Of course, also to all of you, thank you very much for 75,000 subscribers here on the channel. This is mind-blowing. This is a huge community I'm reaching now. I've got a bit of a goal for next year then to reach the 100,000. So can we make it? I don't know. I've got so many projects coming up next year. Thank you very much to everyone who is supporting the channel in any way. Commenting, liking, sharing, sending me beer money. donating in other forms. This is all very much appreciated. And I think we have the best solar and battery community here on YouTube. So thank you very much. Without you and your support, this channel would not exist. 75K. And until the next video tomorrow morning, guys, you stay charged, stay safe, and thanks again for watching. Have a good night's sleep. Bye-bye. I mean, come on. Who would have thought that we ever reach 75,000 subscribers? That is mind-blowing.